The PWA wants to introduce you to our online workshop series, I Hear You Like Rivers. It's a guide highlighting some best land management practices for any waterfront landowners or river users that want to help lower their impact on local rivers and their surroundings. We are joined by the Atlantic Wildlife Institute to present to you sustainable foraging in riparian zones. Sustainable foraging is harvesting a reasonable amount of wild foods while ensuring its availability for wildlife and others in the future. When sustainably foraging foods in riparian zones, minimizing our impact on these vegetated areas will help protect and improve natural habitats and river water quality in the process. Before touching or eating any plants, make sure you're with an experienced and knowledgeable person. Always use guidebooks to properly identify plants. And don't touch or eat anything of which you're unsure. When harvesting wild foods in riparian zones, what's a reasonable amount to take to be sustainable?
Only take a third. Never take more than a third, because you don't know how many people are going to be coming to that place after you to collect as well. And if you take half or more, then they're going to come in and say, oh, I'll just take half of this, and then the next person comes in, I'll take half of that, and the next thing you know, you've got 2 plants sitting there where before you had 50, and now the population has been decimated, and you'll go back there next year and there won't be a plant. So I always try to really kind of leave as minimal an impact as possible so that the plant has a good chance of surviving and growing and getting bigger and bigger, so I can go back every year and collect.
Where is it best to harvest wild foods?
When collecting plants, I always try to collect from a clean area.
Avoid areas that are near roadsides, polluted, recently flooded, or sprayed with pesticides. Eating foods exposed to pollutants could potentially make you ill and put your health at risk. Join us on this walk to see a few common plants that can be foraged in riparian zones. Wild roses.
So this is a wild rose because wild roses have only 5 petals. The nice thing about roses is they've got several edible parts. At the base of the rose flower is the seed, which is the hip, the rose hips, which are some of them have little tiny hips which are okay. Some of them have the great big hips, and those are the really tasty ones. So they make great jams, jellies. They're great for just eating on the spot. All kinds of things you can do with the hips. The petal, if you remove that little white part on the base there, is quite lovely. It tastes like a rose, and it's just absolutely delicious. And what Michaela has gone to get is, I wanted to show you what we do with rose petals.
Rose flavored honey, which our staff had a chance to taste for ourselves.
Oh, it's really lovely.
Red clovers.
The leaf is, there's 3 leaves on it, so it's trifoliate, and it has the watermarks on it in the shape of a chevron. So that's kind of an identifying feature. And then the flower is the purplish, pinkish flower. This is an awesome flower. This is one of my favorites because you can make fritters with these. And you take this and dip them in pancake batter and then boil them up in some hot oil and a little maple syrup, and they're absolutely delicious. They were my kids' favorites when they were growing up, and probably still are to this day. And any camp that I run with kids, we always try to make some fritters during the camp. They're absolutely delicious. You want to cook them, because if you eat this raw, your stomach probably couldn't digest it very well. You end up with a bellyache. So, but you can suck on it. Kids have been doing this for centuries, sucking on them and getting the sweet juices out of it. So really a wonderful edible plant. It's also a medicinal plant. This works extremely well as cough syrup. For, you know, that like at the end of a cold, you get that kind of tickly cough that just won't go away. You know, every time you lay down in the bed and you're trying to go to sleep and you get this little tickle and you cough, and you get up and it goes away, and then you lay back down and it happens again. If you take a handful of these, put them into some water, bring it to a boil, and then strain it off. Add some honey to it, and to the point where it tastes really good, and then just eat it by the spoonful, and your cough will disappear. Works really well. We used to use it on the kids when they were young. They liked the taste of it, and as soon as they drank it, the cough stopped, and they'd sleep right through the night. So really a good one to know if you have young kids. This tastes good and works good. So it has an antispasmodic property to it, so it stops that spasm from happening.
Blackberries. Blackberry flowers are white with 5 petals. Some species develop sets of 3 leaflets, while others have 5. They are a thorny, dense shrub that vine. The ripe berries turn a very deep purple that is nearly black.
And they'll have the berries come August. And you can see some, if you look around in the bunch in front of you, you can see some berries starting to form on the second year plants. So they're a biennial, and they only produce a fruit on the second year. So the nice thing about blackberries is the medicinal, well, other than the fact that they taste great, they have a medicinal quality to them, and they'll basically stop diarrhea in its tracks. So you can use the leaf as a tea, which is a milder stopper-upper. The stalk becomes stronger, and then the root is the strongest. So if you're in a survival situation and you have diarrhea because you drank some water that had some giardia in it and you've got this uncontrollable diarrhea, this would be a good plant to know and make a tea out of that. I'd probably go right to the root if I had giardia and try and stop that up, because dehydration is going to kill you if you're out in the woods in a survival situation. So a good plant to know. That actually the tea of the leaf tea tastes really good. It's a really wonderful tea. If you got to get the right ratio, but it makes a really nice tea.
Spotted touch-me-not, also known as jewelweed. It has orange flowers with red or orange spots hanging like pendants from the branch. It can grow 2 to 5 feet tall. The oval leaves also appear silvery underwater.
Water a little bit, you get the right angle, it looks almost silvery. So jewelweed, good plant to know. It's also a fun plant because it has these little tiny seeds that explode when you pop them, which are a lot of fun to put in your palm and pop. And I used to love it when I was a kid. I still love it now. And my kids and I still go out and pop these when they're in season and giggle and have stupid fun. So it's also edible when it's very young. You got to get it very young though, and it tastes okay. It's not my favorite, but it's not bad. The seeds are edible too. The seeds actually taste pretty good. So try the seeds if you get a chance.
However, eating too much of this plant is not recommended. It contains calcium oxalate crystals. It's also a medicinal plant used as a remedy for skin rashes, including poison ivy.
Like, wow, that's an amazing root. Where'd you find that? It just kept coming, and just this super long root. And I'm like, and then I looked at the very end of the root, and there's 3 leaves. And I'm like, oh my God. And so we coated him from head to toe in Jewelweed and sent him home and told his mom, you know, give him a bath and da-da-da-da. Well, what we didn't know is that as he was picking the root, he was also scratching his face. And that's the only place that we forgot to put the Jewelweed. And it just, yeah, he ended up having to go to the hospital and take care of that. But the rest of his body was fine. The only place we didn't put Jewelweed was on his face. And
Cattails.
because, yeah, they're not good. The wealth of nutrition that sits in front of us right now. The cattail plant is basically the supermarket of the swamp. It will give you almost everything you need to live.
On the first layer of the stalk.
You see that slime right there? It's kind of like aloe, so it'll help burns and that sort of stuff. So good plant to have around. I use it during the summer season when I have kids out in the woods and they burn themselves. We just go down to the swamp, we slap some of this stuff on it, and it works quite well.
Peel off the many layers of the stalk to reach the core.
So right now, if you peel the ones without the stalk on them, you'll get down to this core here, which will snap, and this is absolutely delicious. It's wonderful tasting stuff, and you can eat any part of it until you get to that. When it doesn't break anymore, then it kind of gets tough. You may want to peel the outside a little bit more, and then you can get back to the interior part. That's still good all the way to about here, and then you're into the base of the leaves that are still coming up. But this is pure gold. I mean, it's absolutely delicious, and it's easy to find. It's in a large abundance. All those are cattails out there. In the spring of the year is typically the best time for the leaves. As they're coming up and about this tall, you just pop them out of the ground and you get a lot of this. And then after that, the stalk starts to come up in some of them, and you can eat that stalk. And the stalk, typically you can get about this much on the stalk, and you just fry those up in some butter, or you can eat them raw. Absolutely delicious. It gets to this stage where this is no longer edible. Down into the root system, the rhizomes, and you can dig up the rhizomes. They're a lot of work to dig up, but you can get down into there and roast them over a fire and then eat the starch that's inside. There's also at the base of the plant, when it's coming up, in the fall when it's down there, if you pull it up from the base and get right down into, it's almost like a little ball down here, kind of. There's a bunch of starch in that little node down here, And then there's little horns that come off the sides. And those horns are next year's leaves. And those are filled with starch and quite easy to access, and they break right off and you just pop them right in your mouth. Make sure that the water that you gather these in is clean. Cattails are nature's water purifier, so anything that's icky in the marsh is going to go through these roots and be purified.
Wetlands have the capacity to help build climate change resiliency. To better protect wetlands, limit the harvest to a minimal. Probably best kept for survival situations.
Okay, these were our last year's leaves that I brought down and soaked just so I could show you how to process them. So you dry them and then you reconstitute them and get them nice and wet so that you can fold them over. You can use these to make rope. You can also use these to make mats. So you can bunch them together, tie them into little round mats, and use them for sleeping pads. You can use these for coverings on shelters. You can either sew them together and use 4 or 5 layers of them to keep it waterproof and warm, because they have if you break one open and look in the inside, there's all these little cells in there which hold air.
Our walk has come to an end, but we hope you've enjoyed this workshop. If you're interested in looking up other forageable foods, here's a few other staff favorites we find during our summer outings. Strawberries, blueberries, wintergreen, wood sorrel, and service berries. Finally, we want to thank our partners and financial contributors for making this short online workshop series possible.